I'm Lance Lysowski with the Buffalo News, coming to you with our fifth and final story in our series this week on questions facing the Sabres this offseason. And this one is a pretty important one. You won't see the Sabres very active this offseason in terms of adding to the roster. They're not going to make those big splash, big high-profile additions, but they're going to try to improve their roster around the margins. And a big piece of that plan is another defenseman. Now, we know that they have rasmus-dahlin, they have owen-power, mattias-samuelsson, and henri-jokiharju, but this team had a very glaring weakness whenever Samuelsson was out of the lineup or Jokiharju had a bad game. When Jokiharju was played well enough to be trusted to have over 20 minutes, he delivered. But there were times when Granato couldn't trust him. Last couple weeks of the season, they were going with only two defense pairs because there weren't enough defensemen in this roster that the coach trusted. This problem really, I guess, became obvious at the start of the season back in October when Mattias-Samuelsson went down with his first injury. And that's why you saw Kevyn-Adams go ahead and make the phone call to the Arizona Coyotes about Jakob Chychrun, who, of course, ended up with the Ottawa Senators. There are a number of candidates here, right? I mean, the Sabres have $19 million in projected cap space, according to capfriendly.com. That's a lot of money to spend, right? They've only got two UFAs in Girgensons and Okposo and one RFA of consequence in Tyson Jost. So there's money to spend. The issue is free agency. We know how high the prices are, and they might be willing to pay a higher price on a 1 or a 2 year contract because it fits within their cap situation. But anything beyond that, it gets difficult. That's when they're going to have to be paying owen-power, rasmus-dahlin a much higher salary per season. And there's too much uncertainty around the salary cap in future years for Kevyn-Adams to make that type of gamble on a long-term deal for a free agent. And quite frankly, the market isn't that great. Trades are the likely route here. We saw it back in 2019 when the Sabres went out and got Brandon Montour. He's having a pretty good playoff right now for the Florida Panthers. They're looking for somebody with maybe a different skill set, somebody who can complement Dahlin and Power much more so than a very offensive-minded player. Now, in terms of trades, you'll read it in the story that's attached to this video or vice versa. I'll go down the list. It's a different variety of skill sets. Don't focus on left-handed versus right-handed. Remember, Dahlin, Power, and Samuelsson in particular can play left or right side. The top of the list, in no specific order, Matt Grzelcyk from the Boston Bruins. There's going to be some salary cap trouble there in Boston. They've got a $4.5 million overage that's going to count against their cap next year. They got a lot of unrestricted or restricted free agents. Bergeron, Krejci are both going to be walking. We'll see what they do with Taylor Hall. There's an early talk that perhaps he gets moved, but defense looks like the area they're going to have to make a deal. Grzelcyk fits so well with the way that the Sabres play. He's already a proven player. He's done it. He's been in a top four situation before, kills penalties, plays harder to play against, playoff experience, and a very reasonable contract. The acquisition cost shouldn't be too high either. Alec Martinez, two-time Stanley Cup winner with the Vegas Golden Knights, entering the final year of his contract. He's older, 34, 35 years old, but with how much younger the rest of this roster is, he fits. He kills penalties. I know he's got a left-handed shot, but you need somebody who's harder to play against, brings leadership. Of course, he played with Alex Tuch in Vegas. There's familiarity there. A little bit of a wild card pick here in terms of the trades. A name familiar to Sabres fans would be Will Borgen of the Seattle Kraken. The Sabres lost him to the Kraken in the expansion draft a few years back. He's a restricted free agent, but, and this is a pretty big but here, Seattle, I don't see them wanting to move Borgen. He's going to be a cheap player. They have to sign Vince Dunn. They're losing Carson Soucy to unrestricted free agency. And even if they were willing to move Borgen, he's yet to really play in a top four role on any sort of consistent basis. If I'm Kevyn-Adams, I want more certainty there. This team has enough third-pairing defensemen. That's the issue right now. They need somebody who can actually play in that top four. When it comes to the Calgary Flames, Rasmus Andersson would be at the top of my list. Since I don't think that's likely, he's got a very reasonable contract. He's younger. They're not strong enough on the back end to give up Andersson. I do think they might be willing to move on from Noah Hanifin entering the final year of his contract, 26 years old, familiarity with Granato, fits well with the way the Sabres want to play, playoff experience, checks a lot of boxes, left-handed. And again, even if Jokiharju gets bumped to the third pair, he's in a much better spot there. You know, you want to be able to rotate pieces. If somebody's banged up, you want to be able to give them a lesser workload. If they're not having a good game, you just got to give your coach options. That's something that general manager Kevyn-Adams has to really focus on. Connor Murphy, the Chicago Blackhawks, played in Chicago when Granato was an assistant coach there. He's had a few rough years, but those have coincided with all the other struggles on that Blackhawks roster. Caveat there is there's term on the contract. The Sabres got to be pretty certain that he's going to be effective in this system, that a change of scenery is the solution here. Otherwise, you risk taking on a bad deal that could cause some issues, although it's not that high of a number. Final trade candidate, Dylan DeMello. Winnipeg Jets, 1 year left on the contract. Another team, though, that's really thin on the blue line. I don't really know if they're going to be willing to move a piece. However, they do need goal scorers. And when you're thinking about what the Sabres could do with Victor Olofsson, potential matches, you know, I know that Winnipeg needs help down the middle in particular. But if you think about potential fits for Victor Olofsson, with what Winnipeg could be losing not only now, but next summer, Olofsson might make sense for them. Going on to free agents, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on these because, first of all, the price is going to be high, especially when we're talking about someone like Ryan Grace and the New Jersey Devils, although I included him in my list just because I think he's a perfect fit. He's going to try to cash in, after a very strong season. Matt Dumba, Minnesota Wild, confidence dropped significantly the last couple of years. Could he be interested in a 1 year deal? Come to Buffalo, play with Dahlin or Power on a consistent basis, get the numbers up, try to cash in next summer or the summer after that. Scott Mayfield of the New York Islanders, harder to play against, kills penalties, checks, block shots, a different skill set. That's kind of the focus here. And I'll wrap it up with Justin Holl, Holl, of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Kind of undervalued, 20 minutes per game in Toronto. I think that you get him out of that market with all that pressure, maybe somebody who could thrive in Buffalo. Thank you very much. I'm Lance Lysowski at the Buffalo News. Have a great day.